Imagine walking into downtown Los Angeles in the roaring 1920s. The streets buzzed with jazz, ambition, and the golden promise of Hollywood glamour. On December 20, 1924, the Cecil Hotel opened its doors on South Main Street. It was a massive 14-story Beaux-Arts building, built by hotelier William Banks Hanner for $1 million, a fortune back then. Inside, guests were greeted with a marble lobby, stained glass windows, palm trees in the atrium, and a grand staircase that screamed elegance. With 700 rooms, the hotel was designed as a retreat for traveling businessmen and wealthy socialites, but the glory didn't last long. When the Great Depression hit in the late 1920s, downtown LA changed. The area around the hotel, later called Skid Row, slid into poverty, filled with homelessness and crime. Soon, the Cecil went from a glamorous symbol of the city's rise to a dark place linked to suicides, murders, and violence. Over time, it became known as the Suicide Hotel and Hotel Death, with at least 16 documented unnatural deaths and whispers of even more tragedies. The first tragedy came just 2 years after opening. On January 22, 1927, Percy Ormond Cook, a 57-year-old former real estate dealer, checked into room 521. His marriage had fallen apart, and he was separated from his wife and son. Cook spent a week debating his fate before finally pulling the trigger, shooting himself in the head. He even wrote a letter to the press explaining his decision. The Los Angeles Times covered the story, no note to his family, just a man broken by loss, dying alone in a hotel that was supposed to bring joy. The case was quickly ruled a suicide, and his body was quietly removed. In the 1930s, more followed. On November 19, 1931, W.K. Norton, a 46-year-old from Manhattan Beach, checked in under the fake name James Willis. He swallowed poison capsules and was found dead with bank checks exposing his true identity. Another suicide. Less than a year later, in September 1932, Benjamin Doddick, only 25, shot himself in the head. A maid found his body, no note, no explanation. On July 26, 1934, Army Sergeant Louis D. Borden, 53, suffering from bad health, slit his throat with a razor. He left notes behind, confirming it was suicide. Tragedy escalated in 1937 when Grace E. Magro, age 25, fell from a 9th-floor window. Her body was caught in telephone wires, slowing her fall, but she later died in the hospital. Police could not decide if it was suicide or accident. Her sailor boyfriend, asleep in the room, couldn't explain anything. In January 1938, Roy Thompson, a 35-year-old Marine veteran who had stayed at the hotel for weeks, jumped from his window. He landed on the skylight of the building next door. Authorities confirmed it was suicide. In May 1939, Erwin C. Neblett, 39, died from poison capsules in his room. Likely suicide. On January 10, 1940, Dorothy Seeger, 45, checked in under the fake name Evelyn Brent. After mailing a suicide note to relatives, she took poison and died 2 days later in the hospital. By the end of the 1930s, the Cecil already had a grim reputation, cheap rooms attracting people in despair, many of whom ended their lives there. In September 1944, Dorothy Jean Purcell, only 19, was staying with her boyfriend Ben Levine, 38. One night, she went into unexpected labor in the bathroom. Believing the baby was stillborn, she panicked and threw the newborn out the window. The baby landed on a nearby roof and died from exposure. At her trial in 1945, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity and sent to a state hospital. Levine was never charged. Then came the rumors of Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia. In 1947, she was brutally murdered and cut in half, LA's most famous unsolved crime. Some say she was last seen drinking at the Cecil's bar, but there's no proof. In 1954, Robert Smith jumped from an upper floor. Through the 1950s and 1960s, suicides by jumping became common. The most shocking came on October 12, 1962. Pauline Otten, 27, argued with her estranged husband and jumped from her ninth-floor window. She landed directly on George Giannini, a 65-year-old pedestrian. Both died instantly. At first, police thought it was a lover's pact, but Giannini's shoes were still laced tightly, proving he hadn't jumped. Pauline's suicide note confirmed her intent. Then, on June 4, 1964, tragedy turned into murder. Goldie Osgood, a 65-year-old woman known as the Pigeon Lady for feeding birds near the hotel, was found raped, stabbed, and beaten in her room. A drifter was arrested but later released. And the case remains unsolved. By the 1970s and 1980s, Skid Row was filled with drugs, crime, and poverty. The Cecil became a cheap home for addicts, prostitutes, and criminals. In 1984, the infamous serial killer Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, stayed at the Cecil. He murdered 13 people and attacked many more. After his kills, he would return to the hotel covered in blood, throwing his clothes in the dumpster. Nobody noticed because chaos was normal there. He was caught in 1985 and later sentenced to death but died of cancer in 2013. In 1991, Austrian serial killer Jack Unterweger also stayed there. Pretending to be a journalist, he killed 3 prostitutes in LA the same way he had killed women in Austria, strangled with their own bra straps. He was later convicted of 9 murders and hanged himself in prison in 1994. The 1990s and 2000s brought more deaths. In September 1992, an unidentified African-American man was found dead in the alley behind the hotel. Cause unknown. On October 20, 2005, David Taka, 58, shot himself in the head. In December 2005, Jacob Chase, 29, slit his throat in his room. In 2011, a 21-year-old woman fell from a window. The Cecil's most famous modern case was Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old Canadian student. She arrived on January 26, 2013, and stayed in a shared room, later moved to a private room after arguments with roommates. On January 31, she called her parents for the last time. That night, hotel security cameras caught her acting strangely in an elevator, pressing buttons, hiding, and gesturing wildly. The footage went viral, sparking endless theories. Guests later complained about dirty water. On February 19, 2013, maintenance workers found her body in a rooftop water tank. She was naked, her clothes nearby. The coroner ruled it accidental drowning linked to her bipolar disorder. No drugs, alcohol, or injuries were found. But questions remain: how did she reach the locked rooftop and open the tank? Her death inspired conspiracy theories about murder, ghosts, and even government cover-ups, but the official conclusion was accidental death. In 2015, another man jumped to his death, one of the last recorded tragedies. In 2017, the Cecil closed. Developers bought it for $105 million and planned to restore it. By 2021, it partly reopened as housing and condos, but its dark past remained. Today, the Cecil Hotel is remembered not just as a building, but as a place where despair, crime, and mystery seem to gather. Some call it cursed. Others say it's simply a reflection of society's forgotten people. And so, the Cecil stands, looming over Skid Row, a monument to both luxury and tragedy. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Tell me in the comments, what do you think is the Cecil Hotel's darkest secret?